Well, thank you. Hope everyone's having a good day today. It's pretty exciting to be here back in Australia. From hearing all that g'day, how you going? It's awesome. So I'm going to be talking today about this topic, being an expert at not being an expert. So as we go through this, the whole concept of this and the outcome, which I'll go through, is to try and give you some ideas and some tools around how you create innovation. So who am I? I'm this weird guy that learns differently, and because of that, I had a really big problem at school. I hated school, kicked out of school. My parents thought that I was a real wild child. Got into music, loved music. Because of music, traveled the world. I've played, recorded on albums. I've just done an album with Peter Gabriel, Stuart Copeland, worked with Pearl from The Cure. So I've done all these great things with great musicians. And at the same time, I started getting involved in thinking about things in a different way, just part of who I am. So, in my roles, I've actually had lots of roles in businesses where I've been consulting or come on board, and these are all sort of titles that have been given to me in the past. Now, I look at titles a bit like genres of music: pop, rock, classical, CTO, creative thinker. They're a classification or a genre to help people understand what you do. That's the way I look at it. And it's easier to put jobs around a genre so you can advertise for a position. But it doesn't describe me, it never has. That's why I call myself a professional weirdo, and I'm really happy about that title. The reason I call myself a professional weirdo is because I like to think different. I get paid to think different. A lot of people think different is weird, so hence professional weirdo. Makes sense to me. And so, with some of the companies I've worked on around the world, I've been luckily part of companies that have taken an idea in its chrysalis right through to completion. Been involved in writing patents. I have a bunch of patents in my name and worked with other groups on that. And we've floated companies on stock exchanges in different countries. So it's this: how do we take this chrysalis an idea through all this navigation of all this stuff to get to an endpoint, which is really the core essence of the message. And on the way to that journey, a whole heap of crap gets added to it. And it's a matter of how do you keep that sort of direction and how do you find the innovation. So that's sort of the journey we're going on here. Okay, so let me go. The outcome. The outcome of this speech, what I'm trying to do here is to give you some of the tools that I use to help nurture and start innovation. All these people bandy words like innovation, yeah man, awesome. It's like, well, that's a great word, and disruption. They're great words. They're fantastic. But what do they mean? And so how do you start innovation? So we're going to try and go through the processes that I use with teams and when I come in or work on it myself. Also, I want to identify what is an expert and why not to be an expert. And that's part of the core of this talk. So an expert to me is someone who knows everything about the rules. Really, really good at the rules. They know their stuff. Great. What has that got to do with innovation? Zero. Right? So innovation is often the opposite, the antithesis of expert. It's actually harder for an expert to be an innovator than it is for someone who's not an expert. And these tools are designed for people who are skilled, who are experts to start to take on board innovation. It's like that being a great musician, it's hard to come up with a really simple song. It's getting back to the core of what are we trying to solve here without thinking about the rules. The rules are things that define you into a standard way of thinking. And that is often a thing that stops you innovating. At least that's the way I look at it. Expert versus expertise. This is a more sort of standardized thing. Expert is also a definition which is a description of the end of learning. So when you're an expert, it's basically a description that learning has ended. You've now reached the pinnacle. A lot of experts get to this point and then start teaching and stop learning. I'm an expert now. I'm a professor. I know everything. I'm so awesome. But actually, not everyone does that, but some people do that. The point is, if you're not learning and you start working on this expert, it can become a trap. Now, expertise is actually a journey. It has a start point, but it hasn't finished yet. And it's the point of learning what's right and what's wrong and being able to challenge that. So expertise is what a lot of people have, and some people call themselves an expert. It's normally not self-defined, but having expertise is great, but it's about being able to step outside of that. So this is a pretty common slide. Most of you guys will know this stuff, but a surprising number of conveniences in modern life were invented when someone stumbled upon an idea or capitalized on an accident. Here are some of them. blah, 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 blah. I don't believe accidents happen. To actually understand an accident, you actually have to know what the accident is. To know what the accident is, you have to know what the accident is not. I know that sounds confusing, but what it means is this. Sorry, I'm screwing up my presentation here from trying to be too fancy. All right. So, give you an example. Charles Goodyear. There's this guy who was an inventor, right? Broke, made no money. He was going to jail, couldn't pay his bills, trying to come up with innovations, and they were never working. Everyone thought he was a weirdo. And so he invented a valve for rubber. Rubber was coming in at the time, and it was like, yeah, let's do rubber. But rubber had this flaw that in the heat it would melt. Right? So he invented this valve to do inflation of rubber, and he went to a big distributor saying, I've invented this valve for rubber. And they went, well, rubber's dead. Look at our shelves. All our inventory's melted in the heat. People are returning our products, so we're not even interested. And he went back and he started thinking about this. Because he wasn't an expert in rubber, he started going, well, what happens if I rub talcum powder with the rubber? Because rubber was a sticky, gluey surface. Started to change the surface texture of it. But it didn't change under heat. And he started playing around with different chemicals and bits and pieces. It was only one day when he was playing around with sulfur and rubber, and he dropped it on a stove, and it changed its total state. It became vulcanized. Now, vulcanized rubber is the rubber format, which is tires, industrial bearings. Every time you see rubber today that's in a hardened state, it's called vulcanized rubber, for most part. The point is, though, that if he didn't go through the learnings and the process of trial and error and trying to work this out, he wouldn't have recognized this hard block of black on his stove was actually something that changed state and could be valuable. He would have thrown it in the bin. So to be able to actually understand the accident when it happens, it normally takes a lot of skill. So when someone says, oh, well, that guy's just lucky. He just did that and it just happened for him. There's often a lot of work that goes behind that. And so the message in that is when you're failing, it's okay because you're learning, right? And it's the amount of times I've tried to do things before I've got it up is insurmountable compared to the times I've actually got it up. So these are tools that I use with teams around the world and with technologies that I build, and hopefully they'll make some sense to you. The first one's called Curiosity Killed the Cat. It's actually Cured the Cat. Next one's Learning to Unlearn, Creating the Box, Back to the Future, and the Attenborough Aspect. So Curiosity Cured the Cat. The purpose here of this principle, and it's just a principle, is to start to identify what can be innovated. So people talk about innovation, they go, yeah, I've got this innovation, and we're doing this, and we've got collaborative teamwork, and blah, blah. It's like, well, hang on. What are you innovating? Well, we got this thing here, which has got a thing on it. We're just adding one little thing to it. That's okay. But in my view, it's about the ability to question everything. Now, everyone's heard that, question everything. They go, yeah, I've heard that. So move on. I've heard that one. The point is actually not questioning everything. It's questioning the things that you don't question. It's the things that you take for granted, right? Got on the bus today? Right. Okay, great. How'd you get on the bus? Well, I got on why would you ask that? Well, I don't know. Why are taxi cabs yellow in New York? I don't know. Why is 60 minutes 42 minutes long? I don't know. So you start asking questions. They might seem dumb, but this is a training exercise like going to the gym. It's like working out your body, but you're working your mind out. You're putting your mind into a state of questioning. And the times that there's so much stuff in your life that you don't even realize that you're doing, it's just part of your programming, and you're not woken up to being able to question it. Now, here is the process. Every day you try and ask yourself 100 questions just through the day. And the questions, they're like a couple of seconds. 100 questions that you never would have asked yourself before, right? If you can answer them in 10 seconds or less, answered. If you can't answer the question, write it down. It goes on a list that is a possibility of a chance to innovate. If you can't figure out a question to your answer, it offers a chance to go and do a bit of further research, and if that further research lies into something, you now have the chance to innovate. Now, give you an example on this. I have a company which I invented from the ground up called Linius, and the concept here was I was working in another technology group. I was in France. I was at the Cannes Film Festival. We were distributing about 12 million assets of content with digital rights management, different broadcasters, and I dared to ask, what's inside a digital video file? Who asked that question? So my response was, well, what do you want to know that for? And I go, because I just want to know it. They go, well, it's got video in it. I go, okay, cool. What, is that what it is? Yeah, it's digital video. Okay, cool. So I wasn't happy with that. So you know what I did? I went and found a way to figure out what's inside it. There are no tools, there's no software available for you to pull apart the internal data structure of a video file. But you know what happened when I did it? I realized there is no video inside a video file. There is no music inside a music file. It's just a series of numbers. It's a database structure of a file container or wrapper holding sample information, which is sound and picture information, in what's called samples. And these are just like blocks of Lego, so it looked like a database. And I went, hang on a second, I'm working with some of the top broadcasters in the world. I've worked with some of the top musicians and recording companies, and no one knows what's inside this content, which is where all the intellectual property lives. Are you kidding me? So I worked out a way to pull the numbers out of the database and reorganize it so I could do on-the-fly post-production without actually going and rendering a file. I could actually build a next generation of music formats which allow you to change the mix on an audio file. What I did was I built a technology called Jam It with my friend Scotty Humphrey. He started as a producer, produced Motley Crue, Rob Zombie, worked on Metallica Black, famous LA producer. We got our heads together. We built an educational tool which you can download right now on the iPad called Jam It. There's about 5,000 tracks that we've licensed from Motley Crue to the Dream Theater to the Jacksons. And if you're a vocalist, you can pull Michael Jackson's voice out on the actual album. You can get the words and sing along and record yourself with the album. You can actually bring John Petrucci's guitar part on Dream Theater up. We sell those songs at $5 a song, which is 500% more than it is on iTunes. Right? 500% more. We've just sold over 160,000 songs. And so you hear an industry going, oh, there's no money in music. That's crap. It's just that no one's looking at innovation. So this art of questioning stuff actually is a great way to start to uncover innovation. Next one, learning to unlearn. This is about process. So workflow, process. We have this process. Okay, take a process and start looking at how you can actually reverse engineer it or unlearn it. What I do is a little trick here. How many people have watched crime shows? There's got to be a bunch, right? So you know what the defendant is, right? The defendant represents whoever they're representing, and they have to build a case, even if their person is right or wrong. They have to build an opposing viewpoint. Now, this is putting an exercise for your brain. So someone says, we do this, we transcode video, we do this, we do that. Great. Build an opposing viewpoint, even if it's wrong. This is an exercise for your brain. It's very hard to do. Well, because you're forcing yourself out of a way of thinking. And these tools, by doing this, start to expand your brain. And they start to open your brain to start to think of things. They're going, hang on a second, what about that? Because you start questioning it. All of these tools are interlinked. They're just a different way to approach the problem. Creating the box. I love this one. How many times have you heard, let's think outside the box? Right? Well, like when I consult to groups and I sit with their teams, I go, cool, where's the box? And they go, what do you mean? I go, we're going to think outside it, so where's the box? Let's identify where the box is. Well, I don't know. I don't know where the box is. Well, how are you going to think outside the box if you don't know where the box is? It's like, well, the box is often defined by the rules of the business, right? And thinking outside the box, to me, is like a guy on a spacewalk. He's out there in space, but he's got an umbilical cord attached back to the spaceship. So he's attached back to the rules and processes of the business. So creating the box, there's a couple of ways you can do this. Draw a box, 4 sides on a piece of paper, and get four team heads, marketing, development, operations, whatever, and say, right, each one of you have to come up, we're going to put the solution inside the box, and each one of you have to come up with a different way to look at actually getting to that solution in a way that you don't do right now. That's from a team's perspective. The way I like to do it in an individual, if I'm sitting at home, is interesting. I apply 4 different principles. And the first one is, ask a child. How many people have kids here? Okay, so you guys will get this. All right, so I come home and I go to Timmy. Hey, Timmy, I'm looking for a new way to handle transcoding and edge muxing on the cloud. Right? He's going to go, Dad, what does that mean? And I go, what does it mean is that we're looking at a way to transfer digital files, formats into a different format to deliver on devices. Dad, what does that mean? Okay, well, you know your iPhone, yeah, but blah, blah, blah. What does that mean? Bang, curiosity killed the cat. He's asking my questions for me. He's now taking that role on because he doesn't know any better, right? And so what's happening is he's forcing me to answer questions that I'm going, they're stupid questions, but they're not stupid questions. And so asking a child is really, really important in either getting a different perspective or starting to come up with innovation because they don't have any preconceived boundaries. Second one, follow a religion or a cult. Right? Great tool. Perfect for marketing. I'll tell you why. Cults, cult leaders and religion are all about managing people, getting to buy into an ideal, and to sometimes set an organizational structure around that ideal. This is great exercise in understanding marketing, how you're going to pitch your product, how you're going to pitch your product internally to your team, right? It also understands how to motivate people. These are radical approaches, but they're not, because they're the most successful exponents of what I'm talking about. And it's so obvious, and I know it sounds comedic, but these things actually work. The other one I call it is kill your prefs. Everyone knows what their preference files are. My thing is when I'm looking at trying to create a box, anytime I think of something and I have an answer straight away, it's in the bin because it's come from old thinking, right? And that's okay in business, but when we're talking about creating a box, let's try and push that. I'm not saying you don't have to do that, but it's this ability to, what we're trying to do is put some structure around our mind so our mind can have some A-Bs to go, should I do that, should I not? At least you've got a choice to make. You've got some tools to think with. And the last one is put yourself into a different state of consciousness. So what I mean by this, if you don't meditate, meditate. If you don't have a girlfriend, get a girlfriend. If you don't play music or go and try a new sport, get your body's chemistry changed, right? It's interesting when you try a new sport, when you get a girlfriend, when you dump someone, it's a pain in the neck. Whatever it is, if you can change your environment and change your state, what you'll find is your body's chemistry works a little bit differently. Meditation is phenomenal. I don't know if anyone does it, but things like that are great. Steve Jobs used to do that. There are a lot of great guys that do that before they start to come in and think about innovation. So they're like 4 steps that I look at. This is one of my favorite ones, Back to the Future. This is one that I've used in nearly every major technology build I've done. So I'm going to explain. I was the CTO behind a company called Gavera, big music platform, and it's been on the news. It's been integrated into Lenovo phones. It's in 21 countries. It's currently going for $1 billion valuation. So I was on the core team. I built all the tech, scaled it at Limelight, CDN. I can get into all the tech, but there was major issues around licensing, DRM, metadata from labels. We're talking global labels, territory controls, all this technical stuff. Here's the way we do it. This is the way this works. You got an idea? Build the press release. Hasn't been built. It's already done. Get your core team. It's already finished. Everyone has to write the press release. Then you all agree on what the press release is. So now you're ready to present it to market. Then the next stage back is build all the user interface. If you're building a tech product. Totally user interface driven. In Gavera, we built every single screen of Gavera before we built one line of code. It did 2 things. It helped visualize for investors what the product was going to look like. Most importantly, it really helped visualize to a team everything they were building to. Rather than, we're building a music platform, it's going to have free downloads, it's going to have brand-supported content on the back end, it's going to have all this. It's too confusing. Here's your interface. You're in charge of those screens. Well, what do those buttons do? Let's do a detailed design specification around those buttons and a use case on it. You're focusing on the end goal. You're not focusing on building it out. Everyone's bought into the output. Then from the actual interface screens, we built the architecture because we could design an architecture around the usability, how many users, and what it was going to look like. From there on, then the guys coded. We set teams to build certain areas of the interface screens. Now, you can have agile methodology, you can have waterfall, you can have whatever you want sitting behind that, but focusing on the end goal and having the team focused on that one goal in building products. We got Gavera built when I came on board in less than a year with 7 people, and most major labels said to me it was completely impossible to build. So we did it. This is another one that I love, the Attenborough aspect, I call it. This is the last one of my tools. And what I love about this is the reference back to nature or other industries that you are not in. So let's say that, well, I'll do some examples in a minute, but the ability to look at another industry or nature when you start researching it, you start to see problems that nature is solving or other industries are solving. Then you can draw parallels to the industry that you're in, okay? But often the other worlds actually design an outcome in a different way. So you might have known this story. There was a gentleman in the Swiss Alps in his lederhosen and his nice big hat with a feather and all that sort of stuff. He's walking around the Swiss Alps. He had his dog, you know, one of those big giant dogs with a board thing around his neck. Comes home and he's got all those birds on his clothes, all those. He was like pulling them off, going, why are these stuck to my clothes? He decided to look under a microscope and he saw that the little birds had little hooks in them and they were attached to their clothes, the hook in the clothes. So what he did was he invented Velcro. Right, Velcro is now used in spaceships. It's used all over the world, from staging to production to everything. And it's a really great way. Now, he was busy. He used the curiosity to cure the cat. He was interested in trying to figure out. He could have just pulled them off and thrown it away. But it's that ability to question the things that you wouldn't normally question that comes to innovation. The name of my company, Linius, has been designed around, very quickly because I know my time's up, I looked at what thing in the world can describe what Linius does in nature. And I looked at a bumblebee. A bumblebee goes out on a path, it lands on a flower, it pulls pollen out, it brings it back to the hive and makes honey. Linius uses an agent, goes out to a video or an audio file, pulls the sample information out, reorganizes it and delivers a different file in the thing. So it's a very similar aspect. Then I looked at the Latin name for a bumblebee, which is Apis Linius. Then I looked at, well, how did it get that name? Apis Linius, the name of the bumblebee, was named after a guy called Albertus Linius, who was the godfather of metadata. In 1868, he classified plants, animals, and trees. So the word Linius describes our process and also describes a man who was the godfather of metadata, which is something that we live in. So moving on, as I'm just going to finish up now, the wrap up. Experts are defined by rules. Innovators are defined by imagination. Imagination is not defined by rules. People and organizations need a balance of innovation and expertise to flourish, in my view. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. Hope that was all right. Thank you very much.